Joining me today on GHC Coffee Break is a wonderful GHC faculty member for the nursing program, Beth Ushery. Get your coffee, we'll be right back.
I'm transferring to the University of West Georgia.
Columbia University.
Kennesaw State.
UGA. Loyola University in Chicago.
Grambling State.
Shorter University. I'm going to Greensboro College, and we all got our start at Georgia Highlands.
No matter where your educational journey takes you, you can get your start at Georgia Highlands College. Georgia Highlands College. Enroll, engage, excel.
Welcome to GHC Coffee Break. Joining me today is Beth Ushery from the nursing faculty at Georgia Highlands College. I'm so excited to have you here with me today.
It's great to be here. Thank you, Susan.
Now, is this your first semester at?
This is my second. I started in January.
Okay, so you started back during the spring semesters.
I did.
Okay, and tell us a little bit about what you do at Georgia Highlands.
Well, I teach nursing. I teach in the first year. It's a 2-year program, so I teach in the first 2 semesters. Right now, we're currently teaching fundamentals, which is the very beginning of the nursing program. And then as we transition into the spring semester, we'll be teaching pediatric and women's health. So maternal, OB, and pediatrics.
And if I recall, pediatrics is kind of your fave.
It is. It's my specialty. I've been a nurse for a long time, and I've focused my entire career on taking care of kids. I don't do big people, I like to say. So I prefer the little people.
But also you prefer them a little bit older than like the neonates and the newborns, right?
Yeah, the premature babies, like in the special nursery and the NICU, that's not my area. That's its own specialty.
Absolutely.
So I prefer more the babies up to teenagers.
So when you say babies,
well, I do take care of a fair amount of young babies, a couple of months old maybe.
Okay.
But just not in the NICU.
My daughter was at Eccleston at some point years ago, and the NICU was, you're right, it's a very unique, specialized area.
It is. It's its own world.
But getting to pediatrics, which is your specialty area, August is immunization and child health, eye health and safety awareness, and we're going to talk about the children's eye health and safety during our first half of our show. So one of the things I think, and I can remember as a kid, we used to throw sticks, we used to do things that are really not safe
Sure.
for our eyes, but also the aspect of being healthy and keeping our eyes healthy. So I'm just going to kind of let you chat for a moment. And
well, absolutely. Eye safety and eye health is very important. Accidents do happen. Probably the most frequent thing that we see and that I experience as a pediatric nurse is children who've had eye injuries from some sort of flying object. BBs, airsoft pellets, smaller things like sticks and rocks and debris can certainly injure eyes, but those projectiles, things that go flying through the air and hit a child and injure the eye, those are some potentially very tragic consequences. You can lose sight, lose an eye that way.
And they're preventable. Things
they
like
really
that
are. They really are. Children who are, playing in or around areas where activities like that are taking place really need to be taught to wear protective eyewear. Parents really need to invest in those cheap little plastic goggles. That's all it takes, and that will deflect flying objects from injuring the eye, like airsoft guns. Those are really popular right now. Paintballs and airsoft guns have been around for years. Back when you and I were kids, it was probably BBs a lot. We don't see too much of that anymore, but it does still happen. But just around anything, bow and arrow, anything that can fly through the air can potentially strike and injure the eye. So wearing those safety goggles and those safety glasses is really important. Once the kids get used to it, they don't mind so much. They complain about it at first, just like they complain about wearing a bike helmet, but they get used to it.
Well, and I think if you start them off, then it's just what's natural.
Yep.
I can remember my cousin, she was probably 4 or 5, and her brothers were out playing, throwing sticks and spears, playing games. You know, and of course, this has been many, many years ago, but I don't think it's changed. I think kids still go out and play with sticks and spears and stuff. But her mom had just told them, quit throwing, somebody's going to get hurt. And sure enough, they threw one, and it got her in the eye. She did lose her eye. She had to have a glass eye. So to me, I feel a little bit even more compassionate or more dedicated to talking about the eye safety for children.
Sure.
It's really scary how fast something like that can happen.
It can. And, you know, something that's seemingly innocent, you know, a child that's in the garage or the basement with their dad and they're doing some woodworking, using a saw, things are flying, that kid needs to have on the safety glasses as well, because it happens so fast. So.
And we're talking about things that children can do to prevent, one, don't throw sticks at each other, but you know, there's the other aspect of something just in the air that,
Sure.
And I know not everybody wears glasses or needs to wear glasses, and there's some unpreventable things. I got hit with some debris in the air, just out of the air. I mean, I was walking, and it got in my eye, and I did something very bad. I rubbed it,
Right.
and I literally had problems for a few days. They had to cover it up, the whole 9 yards, and it wasn't anything I had done.
But you scratched your cornea.
But exactly,
Yeah.
and
It's easy
it
to
hurts.
happen. Yeah, it is very painful, uncomfortable, and it can get infected and lead to some complications. So that's another common thing that we see as well. And sometimes we don't even know what the child got in their eye. They just suddenly begin complaining of eye pain and rubbing their eye, and it's tearing and watering. And if we don't get it out and flush it out with water, that certainly can happen. So the immediate first aid that parents should know that they need to do is to flush the eye out with water. And it's not fun, it's not comfortable, particularly if a younger child or a toddler or a preschooler trying to hold them down or get them to hold still and hold their eye open while you pour water in it in large amounts. It's not fun. But flushing the eye out immediately with water, with a large volume of water, is the quickest and easiest way to clear a foreign object, rinse the eye out, and that will prevent that long-term sequence of events, those complications of the scratching and eye injury that can happen.
Yeah, I think that, and I guess I go back to the cornea issue of and even as adults, we're bad to rub the eye when it itches, or and the possibility of causing permanent damage is really scary.
It is. It absolutely can be.
So on injury prevention and first aid, which was really good, I'm glad you mentioned that on what to do. Any other ideas about injury prevention for the eyes for children?
Just good common sense will prevent a lot of injuries. Kids are really quick young children like to put things in their mouth, but they don't naturally put things in their eyes. So
that's a good point.
So that's a good natural protection, but just using good common sense when children are around in an environment, in an area where there are potential hazards or dangers. If a lot of times adults who are close up to the activity, like particularly woodworking, using tools, drills, saws, things like that, the person operating the equipment usually does go ahead and put those glasses on, but there may be people in the room or in the close proximity that are not protected, and things fly, and a child comes running up to see what's happening unexpectedly, and in those few seconds before the machine is turned off, a lot of times that's when an injury occurs. So
yeah, and I probably wouldn't think about that. They're kind of off the peripheral, and you're working on something, and either like you said, one of the children come up and try to see what's going on, or just a breeze could hit and you wouldn't think about them wearing the goggles. That's a very good point.
So just education too, letting kids know, establishing a perimeter and a safe zone, and when you hear the loud noise and the saw's on or the chainsaw's on or whatever it is, not to come any closer than here, not opening the door, not getting too close, just good common sense things.
Yeah. And unfortunately, sometimes our common sense can get the better of us because we forget to use it.
Sure. We all do.
Well, now that was on the safety side in prevention. What are some of the things on the eye health, children's eye health? And a lot of times we say children because it is children's eye health and safety awareness, but I'm sure a lot of things we talk about can be applicable to adults as well.
Absolutely.
But eye health in general.
Just protecting the eyes from injury is the number one, but then just regular checkups to the eyes should occur, and they typically do if you take your child for well checkups. The typical schedule in a pediatrician's office, they're going to examine a baby's eyes around the age of 6 months.
Okay.
And they're not looking particularly they're not testing visual acuity to see if the baby has any vision issues. They're more looking for unusual movements, symmetry, and unevenness in the way the eyes work, that sort of thing. Then again, around 3 years at a well checkup, they're looking closely at the eyes again, and at that time looking in a little more detail because the eyesight is fully developed and accurate by that time. And then again, we have well screenings that occur about the age of kindergarten, first grade, looking for visual acuity. So if you remember when you were in school, lining up and looking at that eye chart, having to cover one eye and look at the E to see which way it was pointed, we still do that. It's a great tool to identify changes or deficits in vision. So that happens at the kindergarten, first grade level, and then again in about the middle of elementary school, third, fourth grade, somewhere around there. So those kind of milestones are really important to just establish the eye health and to assure that we don't have any problems that we need to look at and correct.
How quick can they determine if a child has or will have, I'm not really very addressed or expert on this, but retinitis pigmentosus. I'm not saying it even right. No, I'm not.
I mean, there's a lot of things that can certainly happen, and diseases and illnesses and conditions like that. It really varies and gets really, really specific and technical. So from the age of infancy, though, if there's an indication of a problem, then the baby would be referred to a specialist, to a pediatric ophthalmologist who can use special tools and lights and scopes to look in that eye and look at that retina.
Because it's amazing how complex the eye is.
It is. It's a lot of moving parts, a lot of very specialized things happen there, and it's very complicated, and we only have 2 of them. We don't get any more, so we need to take good care of them.
And as you get older, again, I know we're moving a little bit away from children, but the eye health in general, little black floater like strings sometimes in eyes, is that a normal process of aging? Or?
It can be. It absolutely can be. A lot of people have floaters that are normally there where they have things in their peripheral field of vision that they'll see. Consistency is the key, knowing what's normal for you. And if you go for an eye checkup, your doctor will frequently ask you if you have those, and if you say yes, then the next question is going to be, are they new? Are they different? Are they getting bigger? Are you noticing them more frequently? And are they impairing your vision? So it might be completely normal to have some of those little irregularities in your vision, but if they've been there and not changing and not getting worse, not impairing your vision, then maybe absolutely fine.
Okay. Do children typically have those kinds of things happen as well?
They can. It's more difficult to get a handle on those because a child would have a really hard time describing that, and so a lot of times we may not know it. Okay. And so they typically are not bothered by those things.
Yeah, like I said, with the eye health, the eyes to me, if I lost my hearing, I think that would be bad. But if I lost my vision, the access to reading and just the beauty of looking around would be one of the hardest things. And my stepdad is blind, and he has the retinitis pigmentosus. I guess that's the one. But he really lost it in the last few years since it's probably when he hit 20. His brother, who is older, it still has some vision, but it's limited. So it's that progression. But when we come back, we're going to move into immunization, and so get your coffee. We'll be right back.
Yes, I am.
Give it to him hard!
No.
Every day, kids witness bullying.
Why you stab me with it? No.
They want to help,
Ow.
but don't know how.
Oh, you got...
Teach your kids how to be more than a bystander. Visit stopbullying.gov.
Welcome back to GHC Coffee Break. Again, joining me is Beth, one of our nursing faculties at Georgia Highlands. You know, just to brag on the nursing program, awesome program Georgia Highlands has in nursing. Can't help but do that.
I have to agree with you.
But we finished up our last segment with the eye health and eye safety and how important that is. I think there's something out there also, August, is immunization awareness. And I think that's really important. But it's also a lot of misinformation and a lot of fears about immunizations. When I grew up, I remember getting the shots, not as a baby, of course, but as a young adult. I still have the I think it was the
polio.
Yeah, the polio shot scar, which I think has now been covered with another scar. But the schools, I remember the school system literally standing in the line
in the cafeteria.
To get those shots.
Me too.
I think that there's even more and more shots than the regime we went in when I was a kid versus today. It seems like with my grandkids, there's so many more shots that they have to get. And I know that we were talking about during the break that the schedule is like this long now.
It's very complicated, and you're right. There have been a lot of shots added over the years as new vaccines have been developed and discovered and cultivated by the pharmaceutical industry, and so there are a lot more than there used to be. And I know that it causes a huge concern for parents. And you're right. There is a lot of information that's floating around, not all of it accurate, that has fueled some of the fears, I think. You're right. A couple of generations ago, immunizations were just part of childhood. Nobody questioned them. We didn't ask any questions. We did what we were told, and we got our immunizations. And as the number of immunizations has increased, and some of the studies have shown some possible correlations and some links that may be associated with immunizations, the parental fear has just grown like wildfire, and I totally understand it. I'm a parent. When I had my children immunized when they were babies and I made the decision to move forward and get them immunized, I struggled with it. But I did a lot of reading and a lot of my own homework, and a lot of questions got asked until I was comfortable, and I moved forward with that decision. So I would just encourage parents who are struggling with fears and with unknowns and with worry and concerns about things like autism to continue to ask questions and to be careful where you get your information. It's so tempting, it's so easy to read something that you see on Facebook that somebody will post and believe that it's the truth and the gospel and then make a decision based on that. But you have to look at the source of where it came from and whether it's a credible, scientifically based source or whether it's what somebody said and a story that just keeps getting retold.
Yeah, and I think it's really important that while we're talking about this in very general terms, that we are not offering advice to anyone about whether you should or should not do immunizations. That this is you and I having a conversation to provide information about immunizations.
And every parent has to make the best decision for their child and for their family at the time that they make it. And absolutely, they should be free to do that. I really believe that everyone has the freedom to choose what immunizations they do or do not do. I would encourage them to have a conversation with a medical professional. Talk to your pediatrician, talk to the nurse in the office, talk to your nurse practitioner. Don't be afraid to ask the questions. And if you're met with a feeling of being judged or not having your concerns heard, then go ask somebody else. The conversation should be open and honest. There should be full disclosure, and parents should feel comfortable and confident in being able to get information, have their concerns heard, their questions answered, and then make an informed decision for their child.
I think that's the key is information.
Information is power.
And there is a lot, as you said, a lot of information even out on the web that some are legitimate resources, some of them may not be.
Right.
But the technology is also, to me, it's almost overwhelming of how much information, and it's hard to kind of pick out or discern what's correct or at least sort of correct.
Right.
And B, which one do you really, and they're very contraindicated at times. You have
Absolutely.
one side that's really, oh yes, autism is caused by all these oh no, so it's really, I think, hard for parents, or even in me myself, when I think of all the, now you can get a pneumonia shot and a chicken pox shot and oh gosh, it seems like there's something else that we can get as an adult, and I'm like,
Sure.
I'm not getting those shots. I don't like shots anyway.
I don't either. Nobody does.
But how do you?
Well, you have to do the reading and the research, and you have to make the best decision for, like I said, for your child and your family. What I would tell parents of young children is I think a lot of people today don't necessarily appreciate the value of the vaccines that are given in early childhood and infancy now, because they think those diseases aren't a threat to their children. So that's fueled a lot of this movement away from immunizations. When I was a young nurse working in pediatrics in the 80s, we had regular and frequent cases of meningitis. I saw diphtheria. I saw pertussis, whooping cough. I saw babies die from whooping cough on a fairly regular basis. And from meningitis as well. Well, we have vaccines now for strains of meningitis that killed a lot of those babies and children back in those days. Now we have vaccines that will prevent it, and the meningitis rates have dropped to very, very, very low in this country. So that's an example of the good things that vaccines have done, and in contrast to some of the negative associations that vaccines carry. Right now there is a resurgence of whooping cough, of pertussis.
I just saw that on
there is
a commercial.
And so there has been a resurgence of whooping cough in this country, and there are outbreaks that are occurring regularly. And so now babies, young women who are pregnant now are often being advised to get boosters, because the way that the babies get it is from the adults who are carrying it and not necessarily all that sick. Whooping cough to an adult like you or me is not going to kill us. It's just going to make us cough and miserable for a little while. But a young newborn infant, 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks old, can be fatal. And so the parents is the main transmission for that. So getting booster shots for adults and parents now is one way that we can help protect those infants before they get to the age where they can have those vaccines. So that's just an example.
And actually, that's a very good example, because they were showing the parent or the grandparent, actually, I think, was coughing into the computer. Gets up and the baby comes in, and he's got it on him now.
Yep.
Physically.
Yep.
So.
And that's a classic example, and I've seen that in real life played out with infants in the hospital in current day and current times with whooping cough, very, very sick, ending up in the ICU and in a life and death situation from something that could be preventable. And
not even infants. My cousin, I have too many cousins, I guess, but she literally. They kept having a cough, and doctor after doctor was not diagnosing it. They went to a really older doctor. He was chronologically older, and he immediately, it's whooping cough.
Picked up on
because I guess the younger doctors had not really.
They haven't seen it.
Right. And so they weren't picking up on it. She ended up in the hospital. I think she was 12, maybe 13 when that happened. And she was really bad. I mean, I don't want to say they had her in ICU at that age for a couple of days and then in the hospital for another week.
Yeah.
But whooping cough, really.
I know.
And apparently there's a real distinctive sound when it's whooping cough.
There is. There's a very distinctive sound. That's where the name comes from, is a whoop. So what happens with little babies is they cough so forcefully and so hard and for long periods of time that they lose their breath and they haven't breathed in a while, and they take this big deep breath in and it makes kind of a whoop. If you've ever heard it, you'll never forget it. It's very distinctive.
Yeah, and I'm sure very scary.
Very scary. They cough so hard they break ribs. It's very scary. It's no fun.
And I know we're using that one in specific, but I think because there is a resurgent. I know that also people with some of the pox, the smallpox, and some of there's been a little bit of a resurgent of other detrimental diseases.
Thankfully, smallpox is still eradicated at this point. But chickenpox, measles has made her come back.
Measles, that's the one.
Measles. There have been quite a few publicized outbreaks of measles that have occurred across the country, and they occur in pockets and in certain geographic areas. It starts small and then will blossom out from there. And so measles is another one that many modern day adults, if you're in your 20s and 30s and even your 40s, you've never seen a case of measles. But I remember them. I know what they look like. And when I was a child, before the measles vaccine was prevalent and perfected, I had classmates at school that were out with measles and in the hospital with measles. So it's a nasty one.
Now, there's one that's called roseola that's different from measles?
Right. Roseola is one of the forms of measles, but it's very benign and they get over it quickly. It doesn't have any of those long-term consequences that the German measles do and that the regular ordinary variety. So there's different strains and varieties, and there's a lot of confusion out there about which is which. Roseola is what your grandmother probably called the 3-day measles.
Yes, the 3-day.
Yeah, and so that one's pretty easy and pretty benign and goes away. There's not a vaccine
I think
for that.
There's not a vaccine.
It's not covered by the vaccine, and it doesn't hurt anybody long term. It's harmless.
Okay. And I just think that's good for people to know, because I think that one is still around.
It is.
Yeah. There's so many now. The fifth disease. There's so many different ones now that I didn't grow up. I remember growing up. Foot and mouth.
Yeah.
Or hand and foot or something like that.
And all of those were around when we were growing up, but they didn't have a name and they had not been identified. So modern day science has allowed for us to figure out exactly what they are. A lot of them are viruses, and the ones you just mentioned are both viruses. And so now they just have a name and have been identified. They were around when we were little, just nobody knew what they were.
Okay. And unfortunately our time is about up. And I think it's really important to kind of leave a message of immunizations, how important it is, but also how important it is to talk to your healthcare provider.
That's the biggest thing I can say. It's just don't be afraid to ask the questions.
All right, wonderful. Get your coffee. We'll be right back with GHC Coffee Break.
The average text takes your eyes off the road for nearly 5 seconds.
All right, welcome back to GHC Coffee Break. We're almost done for today. One of the things I've gotten a habit of putting people on the spot just a little bit. But in this case, immunizations, since that's what we kind of ended up with. So as you take us out in the next few seconds, and we'll go on until they just wrap us up, name as many immunizations that you can think of.
Oh my, okay. So there's hepatitis B, there's DPT, MMR, polio.
Tell them what MMR is.
Measles, mumps, and rubella, Prevnar, which is pneumococcal vaccine. There's the Varivax, which is for chickenpox. There's Gardasil, which is for HPV. There's Menactra, which is for a different strain of meningitis. There's Roto, which is for rotavirus.